find it obvious.
Yeah.
I want to see that good diagram.
Hey, Bill.
Good.
Bill. All right. A little light. You won't have the record meeting, won't you? New Year.
Thank you. Yes, happy New Year to you.
That's all we need, you can just leave yourself.
I was reading somebody's opinion about how far into the month of January do we wish people happy New Year.
I'm still.
People think it ends on the 2nd of January.
Oh, really?
But then there were others who thought it went all the way to the end.
I'm pushing the limit. I thought about it the other day. Probably, I can't go too long. But I figure if I continue to
Exactly.
okay.
That is one of the
Both are on.
things.
Well, you have to turn on that somewhat. Can I show you how?
Oh, yeah.
I saw it around.
Nothing online?
Wish you a happy New Year. Seems like you have to do the next year.
I'm sorry.
Having a chat for the meeting.
I'm waiting,
Oh,
hopefully,
okay.
hopefully she does.
Oh, okay.
Has some extras. Caitlin, did you make extra agendas?
I don't have any extra printed out. I can
Yes.
print someone out really fast.
Yes, do that.
You ready to?
Yeah.
I'll do it from.
Oh, okay.
You said, also, I saw you said.
Yeah, I guess it's on the scene. Yeah, it's a little.
That's too high. Do you have absences tonight?
Jason and Lisa are absent today. And so you need to appoint Mike. Yeah.
You're up. The pressure.
Well, you do it officially
Yeah.
as the meeting starts, so it's in the minutes. Caitlin will be right back up.
just getting agendas.
Actually, yeah, she,
We'll wait for her. She's running.
right, she takes the minutes. Avi can substitute until she gets here, so we can start the meeting.
We're going mics on, everybody? Yep. Good, welcome everyone to this planning board meeting, Wednesday, January 18th. First item on our agenda is a roll call. Tonight we have Krista Swincer, Judd McIntosh, myself, Phil Ruck. We've got Jeremy Chubbuck, we have David Thompson, we have John Beckett, we have Mike Costello. Next item is acceptance of the agenda. Can I have a motion?
So moved?
Second.
Okay.
Any discussions, additions?
Mr. Chairman, could you officially appoint Mike as the,
Mike? I was going to get to it, I just,
before he votes on things?
Okay. All right, before we vote on the agenda, Mike, would you be so kind as to be a voting member tonight? You're appointed now. All right, so we have a motion, we have a second, no changes, all those in favor of the agenda as presented? Unanimous. Next up, approval of the minutes of November 16th, 2016. We did have December off. I wasn't at November, so I will not be voting on this.
I move we accept the minutes.
Second.
Get any edits? No edits. Good work.
Wow, look at that.
All right. Good work. All right, no edits. I guess all those in favor of the minutes as presented? Very good. Next up, we have 3 public hearings this evening. First is an amendment to sections 18-31 and 18-106 of the land use ordinance to define assisted living facility, including adult day services, home or facility, and residential care facility, and to provide for the location of such uses in specified zoning districts. Evan, you provided a summary or a memorandum for the board. Could you
Yes.
review?
Yes, and this is a town-initiated proposal. One of the many items that are coming along to implement the comprehensive plan. This was in some ways, it's a housekeeping measure. It's a substantive thing, but there's an ambiguity in the ordinance around this particular use that our Economic Development Director, Dave Mylan, recognized a couple months ago as he was talking with some potentially interested folks in town. And as we were talking about the Main Street Overlay District, which is part of the comprehensive plan, and thinking of assisted living as a possible potential use within the Main Street Overlay District, which is something we'll get to in coming weeks. What we realized in that conversation was that there was a hole in the ordinance, an ambiguity that we have this use in the ordinance called nursing homes, but by definition, the nursing homes are only places that have 24-hour nursing care on staff and is a more intense sort of thing than what an assisted living facility is as defined by the state. And therefore, by implication, we did not make provision for such use in the town at all. Not on purpose, but just because our ordinance had not caught up with some of the residential care kinds of options that are available for elderly and people with disabilities. So this proposed amendment is intended to fill that gap and resolve that ambiguity. One of the things that the comprehensive plan directs us to try to do. Assisted living facility encompasses a couple kinds of activities per state licensing definitions and laws. In particular, it encompasses adult day services, which, as it sounds like, are facilities that host people with particular needs, either, it could be any adult of any age, it's 19 years and older. It's largely, or often, elderly or people with disabilities. It's essentially those populations who need a place during the day to participate in group programs or get into some individualized attention, and also to provide some caregiver respite opportunities. These places are day homes, so they're not residential care facilities with overnight accommodations in them. They are licensed by the state. And then there are residential care facilities, which are facilities in which provide for overnight accommodations. People can stay in them for extended periods of time. Sometimes it's to recover in a way that they can return home. Sometimes it's they may move on to a nursing home if they meet certain other diagnoses. Again, the state defines these, licenses them, and divides them into several categories. We've grouped levels 1 through 3, so-called. There are different levels of care, but they all have in common that, up to 6 residents. And then level 4 would be a licensed capacity of more than 6 residents. So one thing we've done now is define them, and we've defined them in a way that's entirely consistent with state licensing law. And then the question is, where might they be located in the town? And here we, if you'll look at the schedule in the proposed amendment, here we note that nursing and convalescent homes, which are already in well-recognized use in the town, and are essentially allowed virtually everywhere in the community with review by the planning board. So we follow that as a guideline, and assisted living facilities and level 1 through level 3 residential care facilities would be allowed simply with a permit from the code enforcement officer if it involved no new construction. So they're just moving into an older home and reusing that home, repurposing that home as a residential care facility or as an adult daycare facility. They could do it simply with a permit from the code enforcement officer. If those uses involve new construction or an expansion of an existing home, then it would need to come to the planning board for site plan review. But essentially would be allowed everywhere with that. Now, the exception to everywhere in the medium density residential district, which is, as you know, the single family, 2-family district in the community east of 95, it would not be allowed on the side streets, but it'd be allowed on the main roads, Bannock Road, Forest Avenue, Main Street, Park Street, the Route 2 corridor, Kelly Road, places that have, significant traffic and can accommodate those kinds of uses. Level 4 residential care facilities, the council in discussion was concerned that those facilities, if the residential care facilities generally where there's overnight accommodations, that if it got too far out of town, because these are often high demand for emergency services, if they got too far out of town and farther than a fairly short response time for ambulances, that would not be advisable. So they proposed and directed us to draft this for your review and consideration, that those would be allowed in the Forest and Agriculture District, but only east of 95. They would be allowed in the low-density residential districts, so there's things west of 95 that would be allowed, but not too far out. So that's the proposal. And I wanted to preface my comments to you that it's a town proposal. It's something that Dave Mylan and I discussed, brought to the town manager and the council in committee, and they worked at some and referred it to you. I don't think you should feel under pressure to, if you're very comfortable with it, recommending it with some changes tonight, great. If you feel like you have to discuss it and then make your recommendation at your next meeting, that's okay too. There's no particular time pressure here. But if you think it's forward, we welcome your recommendation tonight, but if you need more time, that's all right too. So that is that's the proposal for assisted living facilities and uses.
Thank you, Evan. Before I open it up to public hearing, I'm going to ask the board, any questions, clarifications from Evan?
So my biggest concern with this is capacity, in terms of, so the overnight facilities, are they then governed by the 3 unrelated people rule?
By the what?
The 3 unrelated people
No,
rule?
they are not. These are separate, separately defined uses, so they are not defined as apartments or dwelling units. These are separately defined units, just as a nursing home would be a separately defined.
So what defines the capacity? So if someone were to buy a home on Main Street and say, I'm going to turn this into a adult day services business,
Yeah.
can I have 50?
You would be allowed to whatever state licensing would allow. So state licensing will govern here.
That's what drives it.
Yes.
Same with the residential.
Yes.
Care
Yeah, in
facility.
some cases, if it's a 1, 2, or 3, you could only have 6 residents maximum. Actually, I think level 1 is 2 residents and level 3 is 6 residents. But again, the state would look at the capacity of the building to the fire code accommodations and so forth to make sure it's a safe facility.
I mean, that would be my only concern in this, is that a nursing home financially only makes sense if you've got enough people there to deal with it, because you need to spread those costs across everything. So no one's going to make a nursing home for 5 people. So therefore, you wouldn't convert a home typically into a nursing home. It wouldn't make any
Right.
sense. Whereas with these, I could see somebody buying a home next to 2 single-family homes,
Mhm.
and now all of a sudden, you've got this not optimal situation, where you've got a group home with 20 or 30 people showing up every day, and on either side, you've got a families that are, so that's the only thing I would want to consider and think through, because it is a little
Mhm.
disconcerting, because all the traffic and all the implications of that.
Are there any concerns like that from the council?
No, there weren't. That doesn't mean that they shouldn't be raised in this, just as Judd has done. Nursing homes are allowed everywhere and they are generally more intense. And if nursing homes are okay in these places, likely a 6-bed residential care facility would be too, or 8-bed, or, whatever. But they would be allowed in the MDR district, but only on the main streets. It would not be allowed on side streets. So that is a limitation, but they would be allowed. And a lot of this germinated in part because we're simultaneously working on this Main Street overlay district and saying what would be a low-impact non-residential use. And going through the lists of our uses, offices and software development, and, all, things that are low impact. Why not residential care facilities? Well, we don't allow residential care facilities. So, and so I opened up that whole discussion, and generally I think we regarded them as low impact non-residential uses, although they're actually they're a form of residential use, but they're a low impact use. In general, they have very low traffic levels simply by virtue of the kind of facilities they are. But that doesn't mean that they're different from a home, or, single-family home, so.
Yeah, I think what I'd want to know is, if you took some of those structures on Main Street and you converted them into an adult daycare facility,
Yes.
what would the state typically grant for capacity? Would it be 10? Would it be 20? Would it be 30? Or is it 5? Because I think 5, then it's like, that's not as big a concern. If it's 30 or 40, then I think if you're a neighbor, you'd probably not be that thrilled with that. And same with the residential, 1, 2, and 3. Sounds like you said 1 is 2, and
I think level 1 is for 2, and I think maybe 2 and 3 are for up to 6.
Yeah. Just
with
to know what
different
that
medical-
capacity is, because that doesn't sound, that sounds like it was, you know, if you had 5 people living there, it wouldn't be that much different necessarily.
Right.
But I just want to know those numbers, I think, before I.
On the adult daycare, what the capacity is.
Yeah, and the
But we can
resident-
find that out from the licensing divisions up in Augusta.
Good, thanks, Judd. Other questions, concerns? All right, I'm going to open it up for public hearing. I've listened to the introduction. Please, if you have a comment, concern, step right up to the mic and tell us who you are.
Good evening, folks. My name is Dave Mylan, and I am the Director of Community Development, which oversees planning, economic development, and code enforcement and assessing. And as Evan so eloquently put, the whole process came about as a discussion we were having because this is a type of business that is certainly expanding within the state. I can answer a lot of the questions that you have. I have experience in permitting similar type facilities. And the answer to those is that each of these facilities, these smaller based facilities are based on state licensing by levels of assisted living. And that level up to level 4, I think it maxes out at 6 people per building. So the ones that have been certainly aware of in other communities, probably 8 or 10 of them that I've been involved with in the past, none of them have been over that. It's it's in a neighborhood. There's 5 or 6 people that are living in there. Oftentimes, you very seldom ever see them. You might see them sitting out on the front porch, and that's about it. The reasoning for why the numbers work, if you had a nursing home with 5 people in it, there's an extremely large level of service that's required by statute.
Right, that wouldn't work, these would work, yeah.
But the difference is these are staffed by CNAs. They spend the night there. But they're not even, in the lower levels, they're not even providing medication. They're just reminding their patients to take their own medication. So it's simply a method that's occurring statewide in how do we, as a aging community, how do we allow people to age in place and be able to have the same types of experiences that you'd have in your own home, but you've got someone there to just kind of look out for you a little bit. And as Evan and I were looking at these, it became clear that we were really having a hard time as to where these, a place like this could actually be permitted. So I think it's certainly a worthwhile type of business that I think that the community would, could benefit from. So I'm here tonight simply to support the initiative. Sure.
Can I ask a question? So you said that the level 4 then caps at 6. So the biggest these could get would be 6 beds?
Correct. Until you get to,
I think level 4 is over 6. Up to level 3 is up to 6.
6,
and
and
then
then
4 is 6 or
8.
more.
yeah, but there's a licensing requirement in there. I don't think there's more than, I don't think you can get more than 8 in these until you get to the services that you would not have in a facility like this. Again, my experience has been you don't have, that all of these facilities are really small. You're not going to see 10, 12, 15 people in those under that, in this category. Once it gets to that level, you're really going to, because as those numbers go up, the level of services go up, the requirement to have an RN on call, have an RN on site 24 hours, all of those keep going up as the licenses go up. And when that happens, as you mentioned before, the cost just doesn't justify it. So what the state has found with my work with DHHS and these is that sweet spot that they found that seems to be working, that the financial model works, is in that 6 to 8 group.
Yeah, this just says number 2 in the ordinance rewrite is with a license capacity, this is level 4 now, license capacity of more than 6, but that doesn't state a cap.
Yeah, I look at, there is I know that from a reimbursement purpose, from licensing from DHHS, I know that there's a cap on it, because I've had to work with the licensing, and they couldn't have more than, I thought it was 8, but I know that it's a very, again, I can use the most, to give you an example, a facility like this that I helped to get licensed in Bucksport, was they had an old inn that they wanted to be able to create, and they had 16 rooms to be able to service this, and we had to go to Augusta to get their license was limited to 8 beds. They couldn't do more than 8 beds.
Can we clarify this, Evan?
We can, yes. I'll recheck the state definition, but I'll talk to the State Licensing Bureau to get both that question clarified and to see what the capacity calculation is for adult daycare, which is different from residential care facility.
Definitely.
Which in
Well,
some
we
ways-
could recommend a cap, couldn't we?
I'd rather follow state rule. I mean, if it's that simple, we followed state definitions. If it's state rule and we just cite that, it doesn't. Yeah, I think we could impose a cap. If the state's limit is reasonable, then maybe we just go with that. But we don't know.
We're certainly prepared to get that information for you
Yes.
to share with you, to make clarified for you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So Judd's concern is valid. I think it'd be nice to get more information. We don't have to make this decision tonight, and then we see what they come back with, and then, David, if that doesn't seem reasonable, what the state cap is, and then we can discuss it farther as far as if we want something else.
Yep, right.
Do I state my name?
Please do.
My name is Frances Neubauer. One other consideration you might have to make for this would be spaces for parking. If you're going to have staff in the assisted living, they're going to have places to park. If people come to visit, they're going to have places to park. So I would think that would be another consideration as to the placement of the facility.
I think so too, and just to clarify, with site plan review, we would consider parking.
Yeah, and I think the ordinance requires for this kind of facility generally, the nursing home kind of ratio would hold is 1 space per 3 beds plus employee parking.
All right, so existing structure, in answer to your question, if it's existing, it's by permit, well, you just got to go to Bill and get a permit, but they would still have to meet those requirements.
Yeah, okay, thank
To
you.
get that permit, but good point.
Thank you.
Other comments? All right, I'm going to close the public hearing. 1, 2, 3. Last questions from the board. I didn't have much on this. I think Judd's point is a good one. Could use a little more information, and then you can come back to us.
So the appropriate motion would be to table this to the February meeting. Assuming we've got a quorum, or the next available meeting in case there's not, but let's hope there is. Assume there
Any
is.
other, will that satisfy with?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying I'm for or against it, I just had that question. so Definitely, yeah, that sounds great. Yep.
All right, with no other questions, we are going to table this, so can I have a motion for a table
I
till
make a motion, we table it. Second,
until our next, well,
until we receive the information, I guess.
yeah, I think you'd have it by February.
Yes, we have every intent to have a meeting in February. Just if something happens and we have a terrible storm, or you all, 4 of you have pneumonia and can't come,
Thank you.
you want to still be able, I'm not wishing that, but, it could be tabled till your next meeting.
Okay, we'll just say table until our next meeting. Very good, so we have a motion, kind of second.
Second?
David, second.
All right. Any more discussion? All right, all those, I guess, in favor of tabling? All right, moving on. Number 2 this evening, second public hearing, recommendation to town council concerning this sorry. That was the first part of the first one, never mind. Amendments to section 18-132 and 18-135 of the land use ordinance to clarify limitations on the use of front yards for off-street parking.
I'm going to move to this because I want to use the overheads here. This is a prime example of an ambiguity in the ordinance that the Comprehensive Plan Committee was aware of, and the kind of provision that needed clarification. That's what this is. This does not intend to change the substance or intent of the ordinance as we understand through the town council, but rather to clarify it so that it's easier to administer. There aren't an awful lot of topics, maybe a few, but not a lot of topics that get more phone calls to code enforcement than this question of cars parking on front yards, especially in residential neighborhoods. And so to have clarity of what the ordinance says you can and can't do in that respect is important. Right now, the ambiguity arises from the fact that there is a section of the ordinance, 18-132, that addresses what can be done in so-called front yards. Now, to those of us who are familiar with zoning law and deal with it all the time, front yard is a synonym or is synonymous with front yard setback. That's normally what that means. The definition of front yard in our ordinance might mean that, or it might mean the entire distance from the street right-of-way line to wherever your house, the front door of your house is. So whereas the required front yard setback in most districts, residential districts, is 20 feet, the question is, does front yard mean that 20-foot width, that 20-foot band across the width of your lot, or does it mean the entire distance from the street right-of-way line to the front facade of your house, no matter how deep your house is set back? If your house is set back 100 feet, does it mean everything up to 100 feet? Or does it mean that? 18-132 in the definition don't make that crystal clear. And then there's another section that's under a standard that relates to simply lot and yard requirements. There's another section that deals with off-street parking in 18-135, and there is a very specific provision which seems to lend some clarity to what 18-132 means, and that is, in 18-135, it makes specific reference to no parking between the paved portion of the street and the front of the building in the medium-density residential and high-density residential districts. Clearly, we have lots of parking going on in many other districts in that front area, not in the front yard setback, but in the area between the edge of the front yard setback and the building. University Mall, retail stores of all kinds, all-town gas station, which have been approved. And so I don't think that statement in 18-130 was meant to simply prohibit all parking in front of a building, because clearly we have that, and you've approved it as a planning board, and your predecessors have approved it over all these years. But there is this ambiguity as to what it means, and then we've got that very specific statement in the off-street parking thing as it relates to MDR, medium-density residential and high-density residential. It doesn't apply to low-density residential, doesn't apply to commercial 1 or commercial 2, doesn't apply to forest and agriculture district, it just applies to MDR and HDR. Anyways, so the bill has had a difficult time knowing exactly what the council intended, so we went and had a workshop with the council as an agenda item on one of their committee meetings and asked them as a matter of policy, what did they intend? in retrospect, at least what do they intend today, that to mean? And the answer is depicted in this sketch, which is incorporated into the proposed amendment. And you can see that in a typical situation, this is in part in any district, but in large part in the MDR and HDR districts. You can divide the lot, the area between the paved right-of-way, the pavement of a street, and the building on a lot. You can divide it into several sections. The first section, I don't know if I don't think you can see, can you see that pointer?
Yes.
Right here, the paved part of a street is not the entire right-of-way. The paved part of the street might be 20 or 24 feet, whatever it is, but then there is an area of the right-of-way that's, that's within the public property that is not paved. It might have a sidewalk on it, it might have trees on it, it might have nothing on it, except vegetation. And that's part of the street. There's simply no parking. You can't appropriate that for your parking, on your lot. And the ordinance is clear on that. And then from the property line in, for some distance, whatever the required minimum setback is, front yard setback is, that is an area also in which parking in any zoning district is not allowed. Now, we have one district, the Village Commercial District, that does not have any required setback, so that's not an issue. But in every other district, there is a required setback, and no buildings, and the ordinance says parking cannot be in that front yard setback area. That's clear. Except insofar as the driveway might be there, the driveway crosses that. And that, in that area runs the entire width of the lot, that setback area. Then, there's an area that's immediately between the building, the front of the building, and the front yard setback line. And the question became for the council, did you mean to say in the ordinance that there would be no parking in front of the building for the entire width of the lot? Or did you mean to say that there'd be no parking in front of the building just between the building itself and the front yard setback? And so if you can imagine this driveway right here. See this driveway right here? Mm-hmm. And what a lot of people do, can you hear me? I hope this is recording.
Yes.
It just won't stay there. If you can see that cursor, people will often come in and do a thing like this. Mm-hmm. To park a boat or an RV or an extra car. That's not in front of the building. It's between the building. If you drew a line across the entire front edge of the building, it'd be between that line and the front yard setback, but it's not immediately in front of the building.
That's defined
As
as a side yard.
opposed to doing that in the other direction where it is directly in front of the building.
Right, that other direction is the side yard?
It still is, well, it's not a front yard setback, it's not a side yard setback. You can't park within 5 feet. You gotta have a 5-foot vegetative buffer, but that's a different question. There's an area of the lot that is just lawn or yard area. Mm-hmm. It's not a front yard setback, it's not a side yard setback, it's not a rear yard setback. It's just land that people do lots of things on. Mm-hmm. But the question was, what did they mean? And what they said, they intended, they believe, in retrospect at least, this council said they intended, and would like us to clarify, is that in the MDR and HDR districts, not the other districts, but those two districts, no parking in front of the building for the width of the building, except for the driveway, for whatever the width of the building is, and the front yard setback line. That indeed it is perfectly okay, if you're going to have you can't just do it on the lawn. The ordinance says you got to have a gravel base or something. If it's 10 parking spaces or more for a larger use, it's got to be paved, but under 10, it's got to be a gravel base, at least. You can come out here or park, and you can certainly park next to the building. That's not an issue. It's here. So what this ordinance says, it memorializes that, it clarifies that, it amends 18-132, and 18-135, so they are consistent with each other. And it basically says this: parking, you can't park in this first area along the street. You can't park in the front yard setback area in any district. And in the MDR and HDR district, you cannot park immediately in front of in the area that's immediately in front of the building to the front yard setback line. The ordinance goes on, because there are exceptions to everything. People can think of all sorts of scenarios, and you try to anticipate them. And one is, well, what if somebody has a semicircular driveway? That by definition goes through the front yard. What if they have Rainstorm, the Brian Rahill property, which is kind of a loop-de-loop, which was approved, and so forth. So the ordinance goes on to say that, yes, you can have these driveways that are semicircular, and if you've got a second curb cut, it could be semicircular, or if you've got a curb cut, it could be a, kind of a circle in that area, but the parking would have to be limited to whatever that driveway is. It wouldn't be on all over the lawn. So if you look at the ordinance, now the language of the ordinance where all this gets detailed, you will see that the first part amends 18-132, use of front yard. And it makes a cross-reference to section 18-135. And it makes clear that the front yards we're talking about is what's in the schedule of dimensions for the zone, that is the front yard setback area. And then 18-135, because that's where the detail on the MDR and HDR district lies, the special treatment of those district lies, clarifies that the parking is not allowed in the areas that we've just shown on this diagram, and the diagram becomes part of the ordinance. But it also then goes on to say that, where in the MDR and HDR districts, a circular driveway, or where the code enforcement officer grants permission for more than one curb cut, a semicircular driveway may be located within the front yard between a building and the street, but no parking shall be allowed outside of such a driveway. And then the question is, well, can't you make the driveway infinitely wide as the whole front yard, that whole area? And so we looked at various situations that we found in Orono, and basically said a curb cut can only be 20 feet wide to begin with. So through the setback area, it can't be any more than 20 feet wide. Can't be more than 24 feet wide within 50 feet of the front property. That accommodates a two-car garage. And no wider than 36 feet within 50 to 100 feet. Beyond 100 feet, the visual impact is very limited, so there is no limit there. So that's the proposal.
Very good, thank you, Evan. Again, before I open it up to public hearing, we have questions, clarifications from the board? And again, you mentioned you've talked with council of what they intended, but I would imagine that none of those councilors were even around when this was first formed, is that correct? I mean,
yeah, this ordinance, the ordinance we're working off of, and everything we're amending now it was basically in place. I mean, there's been some major changes, but
yeah,
the basic framework of it was in place in 1999.
okay.
And so I don't know
Figure
that
most
any
of them
council
haven't been
remains
around,
now that was on 1999. There were councilors recently retired, but a couple were close to that era, but.
You've seen several towns, this fairly consistent with what other communities have done?
Yeah, and some communities are more strict, some communities are not as, don't just really talk about that front yard setback, but I think this is pretty consistent.
Is there any time limit? In other words, if somebody pulls up and parks in front of your house, which maybe my daughter does or whatever, wants to come in for 15 minutes and go back out, is that a violation?
Oh, probably not. I mean,
Technically, I guess
it's,
it is.
I think what happens, and you can talk to Bill, I think Bill's here. I think the real issue is, does it happen overnight?
Okay, thank you.
Because that's really where the problems come, if they become sort of permanent spaces.
So how has it been enforced? So
Been enforced-
has it been enforced like this or with the front setback?
This has been enforced. The question was, Bill's inclination, and I'll speak for him, but he can correct me. His inclination was to, based on section 18-132, that language that says no parking in the front yard between the building and the road for the width of the lot, was to not allow anything that would be in front of the building, whether it's directly in front or anywhere along
even the
the whole
side
width of the lot.
parking.
So you couldn't even do that side thing that and we just didn't know, gee, did the council mean to be that stringent? Is that what the council intended? I wasn't reading it that way.
So this is less restrictive than what he's been enforcing?
Yeah, I think that Bill was trying to figure things out, so.
I mean, I'm okay with that answer, I just wanted to know.
I can't speak for him. I think he was relieved that this is what was intended. But I think the question arose where it really hit was, he had a situation where a parking area had been pulled off to the right, in this diagram, to the right of the driveway. And he was about to say, no, you can't do that.
And people have boats, they have trailers, all kinds of stuff.
Yes, good evening. What I was doing is, I asked this question of the town attorney at the time, got to be 6 or 7 years ago. The town attorney, Tom Russell, said that you'll see the dotted lines, they show the property lines, and he said no parking anywhere from the dotted line to the dotted line up to the house. That's what so I spent 6 or 7 years telling people, no, that you can't park there. And it led to some discussion. I can't remember what the trigger was, but there was a discussion that we had, and we researched it, and Evan said, it really does mean this, so that's why we went to the council.
That seems excessive to me, that property line to property line. But other comments, questions from the board?
And the town attorney's opinion was based on the wording in
Right.
section 18-132, which says no parking in the front yard.
Okay. Other questions before I open it up? All right, public hearing is open. Please step up if you have a comment.
My name's Tammy Doobie, and I'm not going to be able to be as technical with all the terms as they are, but I'm going to use the same diagram, and what I would like,
All I have to do is just swing the mic over, yeah. thank
Okay.
you. We record.
what I would like to ask the board is that they approve that this area right here is approved, that if someone wants to park there, that that's fine, that it doesn't have to be flush with the building, because our area is not like this diagram, but if you made this a garage right here, they're saying that a vehicle can be parked right here flush with the garage as if it's a second door garage, but in front of that, it can't be parked. So we had a warning on one of our vehicles saying that we could have up to $1,000 fine and go to court if we have a vehicle parked in front of, well, not in front of the garage, but in this area here. That's not our front yard, it's not a side yard, it's not our backyard. So I would like you to consider that not being part of the front yard.
So I believe the clarification, and as it's proposed here, that's allowed, correct?
Yeah, I think so.
Right.
So also, I had a discussion, Dave Mylan and I had a discussion with
Thank you.
the police department yesterday. And I believe that the scenario she laid out, she's correct. You can park in that area she was pointing to. And we pointed it out to the police sergeant that posted the notices for us at 2 o'clock in the morning. And I told him that's what the situation was. I don't recall talking to you yesterday or today. Okay. And I think oh yeah, okay, we did talk about that. And that is permissible.
Actually
that what she described would not be a violation. But the officer didn't realize that, so,
So it sounds like we've got you covered with this proposal. It's only that, just that angled hatch there in front of the building between the front yard setback and the building itself. So the side yard where you propose your vehicle, I think you're good with how this is, I guess, clarified. Very good, thank you. Other comments? All right, last call. I'm gonna close the public hearing, leave it for further comments from the board. This seems like a reasonable proposal to me. I don't think the intent was to go front yard wide. That doesn't make sense to me. I mean, people have boats, trailers, you know, you need a place to park things, so that it seems reasonable. I guess I agree with the council's
Absolutely.
approach.
I'm good with this proposal. I think
Okay,
it avoids parking right in front of the building. It limits the
Yep.
parking somewhat, but not too much.
right. I guess other comments, or we leave it as is? As is?
Say as is.
All right, I'm ready for a motion.
You want to do it, or you want me to do it?
You're up, Judd.
I move that we recommend to the town council the changes outlined for section 18-132 and section -135 concerning front yard parking.
Good enough. We have a motion, can I have a second?
Second?
Very good. Further discussion? I guess all those in favor of moving this on, thank you. All right, one down. The third of our public hearings this evening is an amendment to the zoning map by rezoning the following lots from medium-density residential to village commercial. Tax map 27-2, lots 21, 22, 23, 24, and 25. The addresses of these lots are 3, 5, 7, 11, and 15 Forest Ave. Evan, you're up again.
Yes, again, this is a town-initiated proposal, but it comes to you from the council for recommendation as a result of two concurrent and converging forces. One is that we had a visit from Bill Reed, who is here, representing Dr. Arsenal and the Orono chiropractic facility, exploring possibilities of what can you do and what can't you do. Maybe we need to expand at some point, and if we need to expand, we don't have the proper zoning, and we may need to acquire a lot to, an adjacent lot and so forth. It's all exploratory. But that in turn coincided with the comprehensive plan's recommendation that as interest evolves, that the town consider incremental expansions of the village commercial district boundaries. You'll recall a couple of years ago, we did that on Myrtle Ave by a lot. And this was an area that we're talking about here. We knew that there were a couple of commercial properties right nearby. And so, given the property owner interest and that wording and the fact that we're in the midst of implementing pieces of the comprehensive plan, we did approach the town council, or we suggested that Mr. Reed come to a council committee meeting and have an early discussion with the council to see what their initial pulse of this was. And their initial pulse was, on the face of it, it seems reasonable, at least it seems reasonable to go out and get public comment and hear more from these property owners as to what their wishes might be, and get a recommendation from the planning board, and then that'll go back to council for further discussion, their own public hearing and decision. So the 5 lots that we're talking about are immediately west of the edge of the existing village commercial zone right here at Forest Avenue, Woodman's Grill property. I'm sorry, right here, Woodman's Grill property. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 properties, right, goes right to there. And this is Orono Chiropractic right here. This is the Fairpoint Central Office right at the other end, and there's a 2-family and 2 single-family homes in between. So, and here you've got the Circle K property and the municipal property. We're sitting right now in this Village Commercial District right here. And the parking lot is here and the school property is back here. So, you know, that's the layout of the situation there. The 5 lots total about 1.37 acres. And on surface, it looks like a reasonable incremental expansion of the village commercial zone. Now, as you know, rezoning can happen of a map. A map amendment can happen in a couple of different ways. One is this way, which is what the town council asked staff to bring to the planning board for recommendation. That is a simple map change. You simply redraw the line because you reach a conclusion that doing so would be consistent with the comprehensive plan, that the uses are reasonable there, that it has the characteristics of a village commercial district suitable for that, and that the new boundary line is a reasonable boundary line in the context of, you know, the bigger picture. I should say they're immediately across the street from these 5 properties are the post office facility, but then also a single-family home in the MDR, medium density residential district, which is directly across from the chiropractor's office. So that's one way to do it. That's the simple way to do it. It's still a weighty decision, but it's logistically simple. The second way to do it is to say, well, in general, it's okay, but we want to impose limitations that would not ordinarily apply in the village commercial district. And those limitations might be a more limited list of uses than what would ordinarily be applied in the village commercial district. It might be some standards relating to required parking or required buffering, that sort of thing. Any expansions here or new construction would require site plan review, so to some extent you'd be reviewing these things anyways. But if as a matter of zoning, you did not want to go the simpler route because you felt that there were some issues that needed attention, you could propose that the town, recommend that the town do what's called a conditional zone. A conditional zone is the close cousin of a contract zone. A conditional zone is a town-initiated rezoning with conditions, whereas a contract zone is the property owner-initiated rezoning that then has those extra limitations. Usually a contract zone happens when a property owner comes in for his or her single property, and when you are...
Rainstorm?
Huh?
Is it rainstorm?
Yeah, rainstorm was a contract zone, yep. We have maybe 5 contract zones. They're not they're not uncommon, but they're not everyday things either. Contract zones really should be for relatively unique situations. You know, usually you try to figure out, is this generally suitable overall for this, and just go with the simpler method. But if there are issues that you think need to be addressed based on what you hear from the public or your own conversation, then you could always recommend, well, yes, but go the conditional zoning route, which means creating a whole new zoning district effect for these, in this case, for these 5 lots, and having a district that would be called conditional village commercial in the ordinance, and says, here's village commercial, and here is allowed uses, and here's what's prohibited, and here are its standards. So that's more effort, and would require a different level of amendment.
Thank you, Evan. Very good. Again, before I open up the public hearing, questions, comments from the board? Again, just a reminder for those of you that weren't, Evan, can you point out, just show the most recent addition, again, just a little bit of history for Kenny's property that we added, so it's
It was,
right across the street from Rosebud. Yeah, right around there, yep. So we added that. Again, we talked about this in the comp plan, the walkability and trying to, I guess, support that type of activity, so. Decent history for the board. Some of us were here for that. Very good. No questions. I'm going to open it up for public hearing. Invite you to step up and state your name.
Good evening. My name is Terry Morrow, and I live at 18 Forest Avenue, and I'm on the other side of this proposed rezoning.
Adjacent to the post office, that lot?
Yeah, tall brown house next to the post office. Yep. Okay. I'd like to direct my question to Evan. Refresh me a little bit, Evan, about the comprehensive plan and the expansion of the commercial district.
the comprehensive plan in the land use section raised as an issue the physical constraint of the existing village commercial district and the relatively limited space there is for expansion is hemmed in a couple places by land uses or physical things that simply limit it. And so what it said was that is the plan's policy for Orono downtown to grow in a compact, walkable manner, building on its village architecture and character, and recommended a strategy of identifying properties at the edges of the existing as of 2013 village commercial district that should be rezoned to be included within the district without disruption of other adjacent properties that are zoned residential.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. That's a pretty congested area as it is now, if most of you have tried to drive up Forest Avenue at the stop sign. So I hope the planning board and the town council will consider the traffic issue in that area. And as a resident of that area, I'm very aware of it. Okay, thank you.
Evan, could just to clarify too, with the traffic issue and parking, village commercial, there's no parking requirement, but you've referenced in there that there's the new town lot as part of the credit union, so.
Yes, there is, the commercial uses in the village commercial have no minimum off-street parking requirement. Now, what would normally happen is that if there was expansion of a proposed commercial use, it would have to come to this board for site plan review. And what the planning board would look at is, one of the standards is it safe traffic-wise, and does it significantly, seriously add congestion to existing, or would it create congestion problems? And so the planning board would look at, well, what's the available public parking? How far is it away? How likely is it that people will use that public parking? And there is public parking within, well, it's less than 250 feet, so it's the equivalent of a half a block away, but it is crossing two streets, and those are barriers. The distance is very short, but the barriers are at least psychologically there, if not physically there. And there's also parking in the town lot, but there's no way to get from the town parking lot through the sloped wooded area behind these buildings. So I think the worry on the part of residents would be that people might start parking on the street. Now, there is no parking to a certain point on Forest Ave. Forest Ave is not a wide road, so it would be hard to have parking there without, safely. So I think during a site plan review, it would be within the planning board's purview to say there is no minimum, but as a matter of this particular situation, because of the standard that we have to find that this will not cause traffic problems, you could require off-street parking for the property. The other way to go about it is if you wanted to build it into the zoning itself, then you'd go to the conditional zone route, because that would become a condition that does not ordinarily apply in the district. So I think you could probably address it either way, or both ways. So,
Okay, thank you. Any comment before we invite others up there? I mean, traffic is clearly an issue there. It stacks up in the morning. I looked at that, but I also looked at the properties in relation to the rest of the village commercial. So I had the same concern that she brought up. I wasn't sure about parking or traffic, but knowing that there was parking across 2 streets. So I don't know. Any thoughts on that before?
I mean,
Yeah.
oh, go ahead.
I think we have another person
Yeah,
wanting
no,
to
I'm just
speak.
curious if we wanted to address this, but well, I guess we can invite other comments and we'll hit this one again.
Hi, my name is Bill Henderson. I live at 7 Forest Avenue.
Could you just clarify, just so we know, which is your property on that? A relation to this proposal?
It's in it.
7 Forest
Okay,
Avenue.
you're in 7. Okay, 7's right in it. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
My first question is, will this have any effect on my property taxes, this proposed change?
That's a good question.
Very important to me.
Yeah.
I don't think we can answer that.
Effect on property taxes, I can't.
every time one of these comes up, that's the question that gets raised, and every time I go and talk with the tax assessor, no, the assistant tax assessor, Rick Sands, and what Rick says is it's impossible to know. That the zoning itself doesn't cause the property value to go up. It's what the market will say over time, whether the market starts acquiring these properties at a value that's higher than the current assessed value. His experience is that often the residential use has a higher assessed value than certain of the commercial uses, and sometimes it's the other way around. So he doesn't know. It's not, the value is not dictated by the zoning, it's dictated by how the market reacts to whatever the zoning is. On its face, it does not affect taxes. It could if the market over time says, oh, I can do more things here. Now, instead of paying $100,000 for that property, I'm willing to pay $120,000 for the property. And then fair market value would rise.
You've sort of answered my second question in a roundabout way. How will this proposed change benefit me?
Well, some property owners would, that would probably weigh both the pros and cons. The advantages is that it gives any of those 5 property owners a lot more flexibility as to how the property could be used. That if at some point you wanted to either yourself or somebody to whom you might sell, they could say, I could use it for residential purposes, or I could use it for commercial purposes. I could, so it broadens the market, that if you ever wanted to sell the property, or yourself wanted to do something, you would have many more options than you do today. Right now, your options are single-family home or single-family home.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Others? We beat you.
Hi, I'm Bill Reed with the Marciello Group. I'm representing Dr. Arsenault and Orono Chiropractic. He was unable to make it tonight, so he asked me to come and go over. Originally, what we had done is he had brought me on a year ago to consult on how to improve the business model. And basically what we've done is we've restructured the day, we've put new infrastructure in place and investment. Over this year, we spent, I think, almost $100,000 in improvements. One of the, I think, common goals that we have is parking. We don't, Dr. Arsenault doesn't want his clientele traveling great distances. His whole idea was how do we go about expanding parking in the back of the facility so it's a level type of situation. How can we work with the town of Orono on the parking issue, because there is a natural gradation, which we had a gradation plan done that we could make a grazing walkway up to the town parking lot. And there are opportunities, I guess you lease spaces out if we could not expand our current lot. The currently, we're in discussions with an abutter about acquiring property. Before we even proceed or even go further into those discussions, we have to make sure that the zoning's correct before we start investing money to look at options. The main goal is that parking on the street really isn't acceptable, because we've had problems with people parking across the roadway, and he doesn't want his clientele walking across the street, because it can be dangerous at times. Currently, there are staff members that park in the upper parking lot over by the post office and walk down to try to free up spaces. Long-term wise, Dr. Arsenal does want to expand the business. So it's basically come down that over the next year, he's going to have to make a decision on if the facility has to relocate. And unfortunately, there are not many suitable buildings for his expansion model, or his plans for like what parking would require and for what he'd like to do, in Orono currently. So we talked with the town officials and said, what can we do so we can start discussing the options that we have at the current site. I think the item that they had pointed out, that Fairpoint is one end, we're on the other end. We're in discussions with an abutter currently that may afford us the opportunity for additional parking. It's something that could work out reasonably and it would fit within his budgetary model. We can't commit, of course, as I told Evan and Dave, we can't commit to anything because we have to keep all of our options open. But, he would like to continue to invest in Orono and the area, but also, help his clientele have an improved experience for coming in. I think that's the brief summary. If you've got any additional questions, I was kind of doing this on the fly tonight. Dr. Arsenal had the commitment come up and he asked me to pop in to go over this, brief presentation. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Mark Laverdier, I am the owner of 5 Forest Avenue. I don't know if you can see if I can show you here, this lot here. And I certainly don't have any objection to this proposal. I've got mine is a 2-unit building, and I have a large barn that's empty. It's probably about 1,500 feet. And, I certainly would like to be able to put that to some use potentially in the future. I don't have any imminent plans, but, my lot has quite a bit of space in the back, so to the extent I did add anything, I'd be able to put some parking in there. And, from my perspective, if it helps Dr. Arsenal out, I don't have any issue. Bill doesn't have an issue, or I don't know if anybody else on that strip there has a particular issue with this, but at least from my perspective, I don't have any problem with the expansion there. And my understanding is that the village commercial special tax increase has been done away with. I haven't been able to confirm that, but...
OVA, was it?
Yeah, I think for a number of years, there was a municipal development district that included a $500,000 assessment that went towards plowing sidewalks and, the extra things that you want to do in a downtown. I believe the town abandoned that a year or two ago. I'm pretty sure that's true.
Yeah, and to give you an idea of what I'd potentially do in there, I've thought about putting some office space in the bottom of that barn, or perhaps adding an apartment to it or something of that nature in the future. Like I said, I don't have any imminent plans, but got a big barn. It certainly would be nice to be able to put it to some use.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Evan, did all the property owners adjacent to this project, they all were notified?
Yeah, we sent a specific letter to each of the 5 property owners, and then that was above and beyond the normal public notice.
So my thought, I was thinking about the properties across the street. Again, we have one resident that showed up. Also, you said farther along, there's a natural barrier now, because that's where, you know, the drainage goes.
There's a
from
drainage,
the
yeah.
parking lot, and it kind of cuts under there, that's.
Yeah,
the
just
part
west
that's-
of the chiropractic building, there's a drainage with a little wooded strip along it.
Wooded strip, and then there's, again, the drainage ditch, I don't know if
Yeah.
it's seasonal drainage or whatever. So there's already a natural barrier that nobody could develop now.
Yeah, I suppose they could try to, but it would be difficult.
Other comments?
We're still dealing with parking lots. Dave Mylan. I just wanted to, as Evan had said earlier, when I began as the Economic Development Director, I started looking at where areas we might be able to attract new investment into the community, and reading the comprehensive plan. This was one of the first things that kind of jumped out at me, that said that the recommendation was that we should look at areas adjacent to the village commercial, and whether those properties should be used or could be used for additional opportunities. And as the conversations unfolded here, it seemed like this particular project was a kind of the low-hanging fruit to that it met that criteria. It was consistent with the comprehensive plan, and the uses that were there currently were compatible with some alternative types of uses. So again, just support the whole concept of it. To answer the question about the special rate for downtown, the town didn't do away with it, but what the council from legal advice was to not do away with it, but the council instead, they annually vote to determine what the amount has been. And last year, we were able to convince them to recommend 0. So the intent is for it to stay that way, but technically the ordinance is still there, but the council sets it at 0. Just to clarify.
Thank you. All right, last call for public comment. All right, I'm going to close the public hearing. Comments from the board. So I think we have 2 options in front of us. We've heard from a resident with traffic concern, but our options are conditional zone or change the line. What are your thoughts? I would like all of you to weigh in on this. So I'm going to start down there.
It didn't seem like we had any negative feedback from any of the others, so the only concern is the street parking or off-street parking.
I would change the zoning.
Change the line.
Change the line.
Oops.
Change the lines.
Yeah. So we're recommended, so far we have 2 comments that we would expand the village commercial zone.
Change the line.
I agree.
All right, Krista?
I think it should become part of village commercial. What I'm not sure is whether we need to do something to deal with the parking issue. Because I think it clearly is a problem there, and if we just change the lines, we're leaving up to whoever's there to deal with that.
Right. My understanding, any new proposals, as you said, Evan, so anything new coming before us, we would require site plan review. So I'm thinking of even a potential expansion for Dr. Arsenault's office would come before this board, and we would discuss parking.
Yes, I think, there is sometimes confusion over what the meaning of a minimum standard is
Yeah.
in an ordinance. And in the Village Commercial District, the minimum standard for off-street parking is no parking spaces required, off-street parking. But the planning board has to make a finding under site plan review that vehicular access to site must be on roads which have adequate capacity to accommodate the additional traffic generated by the development. And has to have adequate access to the site and provide for safe internal vehicular circulation. So I think it's within a board's purview, whether it's this or someplace else, to say that even though the minimum is this, we cannot make a finding of safe traffic circulation unless you have some off-street parking. And then you, based on the evidence given to you, you can decide what that number of spaces would be. So there is that protection. The more certain protection would be if it's part of the conditional zone, but it's, the downside of conditional zoning, and if the board or the council felt that they should go conditional zoning, then we would certainly support that as staff. Contract and conditional zoning is really intended for unique situations, usually, where there's very little alternative. Because you don't want to turn a municipality into a town with customized zoning for a lot of individual lots. You know, so the first level of review that you always try to get to is this generally appropriate, or is it not? And if it's not appropriate for everything, should it be rezoned to begin with? And sometimes you get to the answer, well, it's generally appropriate, but we're concerned about a few things, and therefore, we're going to do something different. We did it with the Webster Point project, we've done it with 3 or 4 contract zones, in particular situations. I'm sure you'll see it for legacy industrial sites that have very little, are so unique that they need customized zoning. But you don't want to make it sort of a general practice to do that, unless you need to. So that's how we look at it, and if you can provide the necessary protections in the context of normal zoning practice, that's the preferred way to do it.
Very good.
Let's see, I have a question about, Evan. It's my understanding that if something happens in the same footprint, it does not come to the planning board. It's approved by the
Code enforcement?
code enforcement, so that we can't count on if that's correct, then we can't count on every change coming to the board. It would be only the ones that would change the footprint.
The schedule of uses is based on the use and not new construction, and that's an oddity. I won't say it's an oddity, it's a fact of this ordinance. And some uses don't require site plan review, and some uses do. We've held that most office uses trigger site plan review for one reason or another. And often it's because of, even though it's within the same footprint, it may be a disturbance of soil for other purposes, like for parking or access. And then it comes to you for that review.
So it is possible then to make substantial changes without it coming to the planning board?
Certain uses could be, but if it were a retail use or a personal service use, yeah, there are certain things that can just happen inside an existing building. You know, for example, just by way of example, when one use went out of the building at the corner of Main Street and Mill Street, and another use came in, there's a change of use, but involved no new construction or anything, so it never came to you. So I think if that's a deep concern, then a conditional zone standard would be site plan review regardless. You could incorporate that into a conditional zoning language, as we did with, well, as we have done with each of the contract zones. St. Mary's Church Complex was a contract zone. And they did everything within existing footprints, but they had to come to the planning board.
Very good. Thank you. Jed?
Yeah, parking is, I drive that road quite a bit, and people park in it, and when someone parks in it, it's a one-lane road, effectively, and so it's not good. The real solution is to not let people park on it. I don't know if that's an option, because literally it becomes a one-lane road. So whichever lane you're in, you've got to stop and let the other traffic come by. I hate the idea of a contract zone. I think that that's adding complication on to what's already complicated.
You hate the idea of what? I didn't hear that.
Contract zone.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't like things that are special. I mean, what's the likelihood that something could happen there and it wouldn't come before the board? Can you give us some
Well,
percentages?
you know, if you have an office use or a retail use that goes into an existing building and doesn't require any modification of the site, so that it's not moving more than 100 cubic yards of dirt,
Then it wouldn't come to us.
then it wouldn't come to you.
So they could, in theory, turn one of those into a store selling widgets,
Yes.
and it would go through code enforcement.
If it has no exterior renovations, that's right.
Did the town
If it's,
council
if it's
consider
a
that?
new structure or expanded structure, or an existing structure with external renovations, then it would have to come to you for site plan review. Most things have those things, so it ends up coming to you.
Yeah.
So most of
Just gonna put a
the
store
new office
somewhere
stuff
with
has happened, but it is theoretically possible that it wouldn't.
I have some hesitation, but I would vote with the board if the majority felt like they... I've been doing this a while, so you hate to see things come back and bite you, and then you're like, oh, because it happens.
You know, your recommendation, you're not limited in what you say back to the council as a recommendation. So if you have, if you're generally feeling that you don't want to complicate it with the conditional zoning route, but you have these concerns, and you can express those, and the council may decide to go that conditional zoning route based on your concerns.
I think it's a good idea. I don't want the contract zone. I've got a parking concern. That says mine.
I'm going to agree with Judd and Krista. I participated a lot in the comprehensive plan, as did many of you, and this was our goal, is to try to figure out where we can expand, and provide more opportunities in the town of Orono, and that is a likely area. It's bookended by two non-residential properties. One of them has a desire to possibly expand, and that seems like a really likely candidate. But at the same time, I go down Bennick Road many times a day, and I know about Forest Ave, and I know about the traffic. So I'm in support of expanding the village commercial, but at the same time, what I'm thinking about when I hear about the traffic concerns is the town. I just understand they hired a traffic consultant to look at several traffic areas in town, and I don't know if this is slightly outside their scope of that traffic study, whether it goes from maybe Westwood down into town, but I mean that whole interchange. There's a traffic study in Stillwater Ave, but didn't Sophie also want to look at this area?
Well, I think that intersection was included. I don't know that it went down past.
Either way, I mean, right now there's two non-residential businesses. The traffic is a concern everywhere. I think that the council would have to hear our concerns. It came up in the public hearing, and we didn't hear from the neighbor on the just one lot down, but they didn't show up. So but we've heard residents here that live right across. So I'm in support of expanding the village commercial. I'm not a big fan of a contract zone in that particular area. That doesn't make sense to me.
Can I ask you a question? Should I report on your behalf to the council that if there is no other sure way of handling the parking concern, that despite your hesitancy to favor conditional zoning, that may be a necessity? Is that what you're saying?
That's a good question.
I guess the question,
yeah.
Did they consider it?
Yeah.
Did they consider the parking in their thought process, just like with the facilities? Did
Yeah, I think they
consider
really
that?
were hoping to hear from you based on, because this is the first time the public has had a chance to comment on this. And So I think they were hoping to hear from you, and
Any substantial project, you know, like you said, if something comes before this board that we have a mechanism to require alternative parking arrangements and say you can't park there, or some limitations to any new project that could make things worse, it sounds like we have that option from site plan review.
So it seems like a business that would want to go in there, would want to have the best parking possible for its customers.
Yep.
And so by the nature of that, it may be self-governing.
Right.
So
I mean-
maybe this is I understand, I agree with the concern, but I wonder if it's not as warranted as I think we may be overthinking it. If I had a business there, I would want to attract customers. So I would probably want to build parking behind my establishment, which would require a site plan review. So I think we're going to get there.
I think so too. I mean, the storefronts on Main Street, they're not able to park right around the building, so they've got to walk. This place has to walk across a couple streets, but I think we have some protections while expanding the village commercial. It's my 2 cents. So, just to make sure that we're in agreement, I heard from this end, we have more, well, I think parking concerns are in there. How do we want to word this? I'm not sure that I want to stop our recommendation if parking concerns, but I don't know if it carries any weight if we pass on our recommendation and say parking is an issue. How should we word this if we're moving forward with expanding village commercial? Ask for some input.
I'm fine with going with the majority of the board. So if the majority believes that, I think at the end of the day, I'd rather have it be normal village commercial and not do a contract. And so if I had to pick, that's what I would pick. And just maybe say, did you think of parking?
Right. So Evan, I guess that's kind of where we're leaning, from what I've heard from the board, that we're, seem to be mostly in agreement to move forward with this, but just put in there, whatever we can, that the parking and traffic issues have, are a concern. Don't know that that's a deal breaker, but if that makes sense.
No. We'll convey that if you make that into motion, I'm sure.
I think we're all in agreement that it should be rezoned.
Yeah.
Where the question comes is whether it needs to be with a condition about the traffic, or whether it can just go through clean,
Right.
in hopes that nobody's going to create a situation there that leads to traffic problems.
Right, as Jeremy said, that may be, I guess, self-governing.
Yeah.
But, these are the types of situations that we identified in the comp plan, and this one seems like a likely case. But all right, thanks for your comments. I think we're ready for a motion. Who wants to take a stab at
You
it?
want to do this one, Jeremy?
I don't know how I'd do this one. How would you do this one?
I move that we recommend to the town council that they move forward with the amendment to the zoning map by rezoning the following lots from medium residential to village commercial. Tax map 27-2, lots 21, 22, 23, 24, and 25. The addresses of these lots are 35711 and 15 Forest Avenue. I think that the one thought we had was to think about parking, but at the end of the day, we'd go with straight rezone versus contract if nothing else can be done. Does that
That sounds
what everybody heard?
absolutely what we talked about.
You okay with that?
If nothing else can be done, what do we mean by by that?
I don't know, maybe someone comes up with a brilliant idea.
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
Yeah. I guess how I heard that, just before we move on for a second, is that, that the town itself should be looking at traffic issues in that intersection anyways. So, even as part of this, if we're going to expand village commercial, don't want to make something worse, but this is something that the town, Public Works and, engineering has to consider over the long haul, so.
Yeah. I guess I would be comfortable if we go with straight rezoning, but make it very clear that we're very concerned about the traffic issue,
Mhm.
and that, we hope this gets addressed in conjunction with this, not as
Right.
nailed down part of it, but in conjunction with it.
Very good. Strongly worded, Evan, I guess is our request. So I have a second, I have a motion, do I have a second? There we go.
Seconded.
Very good. Further discussion? All those in favor? All right, next up on our agenda, old business, there is none. New business, none there too? Any further discussion? Want to talk about stuff? Nope. Last item, adjournment.
Yeah, could I have, just talk about next meeting? You've tabled one item,
Yes.
so I assume that will come up, whether that's enough for you to want to hold a meeting, just that item or not. But I wonder if we might use the February meeting as an opportunity to review a couple of the larger ticket items that will be coming before you in the near future. There may be 2 or 3 such items, just in sort of a workshop or discussion session, for no action. One is the Main Street Overlay District. That is moving along with some bumpiness because there's not consensus as to where we go. So there will need to be another public meeting, a lot of council discussion before referring to you. But it's logistically complex enough and also interesting enough in a lot of ways that it's not going to lend itself to one meeting and you're done. So to have some backgrounder for you at the next meeting would be very worthwhile.
I definitely don't want this board coming back for the tabled item if it's that simple. But if we add other items to the agenda, people okay with that?
So that workshop, we've got a Park Street moratorium in place, and in time, something will come to you. There's a moratorium on marijuana retail sales.
Yep.
And at some point, there will be an important land use component coming to you. And I don't know what all of that will be ready for sort of workshop discussion in a month from now, but I know at least Main Street Overlay will.
Yeah, if it helps push it along at a later date, people okay with, I like a month off.
And there may be some we've had other people come in with various requests and thoughts, and I don't know how ripe they will be for, development proposals. Whether they'll have applications in for February agenda, they're probably not, but there have been at least 3 inquiries about 3 different things that I think seem fairly serious. So we'll see where they fall in line.
Yeah, there was an item on the council agenda that talked about economic development, some proposal, was that?
I don't know what that is, actually. I saw that too. I'm not sure what it is. I might know about it, but didn't realize it was, have to talk to Dave about that.
Okay, is the board okay if we have, just a tabled item in a workshop if there's nothing else?
Yes.
All right, sure.
Thank you.
Very good. Adjournment? Good. Second? Second. Discussion, all those in favor?
I should have been, we can hook you up with television.
Who's going to Florida?
No? You can sit there with
Commitment.
That's right. Sounds okay to me.
I'm off to Florida tomorrow.
Have one for me.
Where are you?
5 days.
Where?
Forget about this place.